All right. So thank you for joining me this afternoon. We are going to be taking a look at specifically how plugins work in the GW blog service. Excuse me. I do believe everybody who's registered today is an active or current user of GW blogs, so we're not really going to get too much into a full overview of the system. But what I will say about GW blogs is this is the university's WordPress-based service for microsites and for personal sites at the university. So for instance, if a academic or administrative department or office wanted to have a website to supplement their GW Drupal website or some other website they had going on, or to specifically just have a blog, we would always recommend using GW Blogs. Again, it is based on WordPress, which at its core is a blogging platform. And then likewise, this service is available to all current faculty, staff, and students to use for personal websites as well. So all you have to do for that is to sign in with your GW Net ID, which creates both an account on the platform for you as well as a personal website. So if you have never worked with a WordPress site before, it can be a little bit confusing on how you can basically manage the functionality of your site, and that's what you do with your plugins. A lot of people will log into the service and think that it's just going to have everything they need from a functionality standpoint from the get-go, but the reality is it does require you as the site owner or the content manager to make some decisions about what kind of functionality you want on your site, and to then turn on the plugins that will meet that functionality requirement for you, and potentially do some configuration as well. So I'm going to get logged into my team's GW blog site to show you how you would do that. Just from the main GW blog landing homepage, there's a login link in the navigation. You always want to use this blue Use Net ID button, and then you want to sign in with your Net ID username and password. I'm going to be using my team's site. This is one that we use specifically for training. You should always only use your personal GW Net ID username and password. You should not be using a team organizational Net ID or password to create an account on the platform without first checking in with our team to make sure that your use case meets a specific business need for which we would approve that. Just because organizational net IDs are not really secure at the university, we share those credentials with multiple teammates. We're not that great about changing those credentials as teammates come and go. So we need to make sure that we are aware of who's actually accessing our platform. So that's why we say no organizational net IDs without prior approval from the marketing and creative services department. So once you get logged in, the first thing you're going to see is the reader and the dashboard. The reader is going to show you any blog posts that you have recently published, and then your dashboard will allow you to get to all of the back-end administrative sections of your site. I'm going to open in another tab the front end of my site. This is basically what it looks like out of the box. There's nothing really fancy going on. As you click around my site, you just land on pages showing text and images. There's really not much else going on. The specific theme that I'm in at the moment, which is the Tiny Framework theme, has a right sidebar for putting in additional widgets. If I wanted now to do something a little fancier on my site, if I wanted additional functionality, what I would need to do is I would need to turn on some plugins. Plugins can be found in the dashboard admin. It's a standalone menu item, so you'll just click on plugins. And when you click on that, you're brought to the overview page for all plugins. You can see this number right here represents how many are available. And you can see here we're on the All tab. If I were to click through these additional ones, this view would break down based off of whichever I had clicked on. I don't have any active plugins. That's why we don't see anything here, and this number has changed to 0. If I click on inactive, it will go back up to 22 because, again, I have not activated anything, and I can see everything. And then so on and so forth for the types of plugins if you wanted to break down to see specifically what's available to you as site owners and content managers for turning on additional functionality. The plugins that you see represented here are the ones that have been reviewed by my team, Marketing and Creative Services, as well as GW Information Technology. In general, our criteria for approving a plugin for use across the network is that it doesn't break compliance with any of GW's policies or pose any other potential risks, either for you as a site owner, your office or your department, or the university as a whole. So, for example, we don't allow any plugins that allow you to take payment because there's a lot of regulations that go into making sure the information that you're receiving from your end users is being processed in a secure manner. And because it's basically risky for anyone who's accessing the platform to be able to do that and maybe not potentially knowing what all the rules are, we made the conscious decision to not allow for any payment type plugins to be available. There are many, many more plugins available. Some we haven't even had a chance to review. The vendor who hosts our GW Blogs platform has the utmost authority, like the end authority basically, to make a plugin available or to take a plugin off of their system. So, and we unfortunately don't get a notification when new ones come along. So there are more plugins that are available. If you're looking at this list and thinking that this doesn't cover everything that I need, feel free to reach out to us. You can email onlinestrategy@gwu.edu. Let us know what it is you're looking for. We can take a look to see if there's something available on the platform that we can activate for you. If there's not something available on the platform, we can reach out to the vendor to see, you know, why is this particular plugin not available? Would they be open to testing it to make sure that it meets all of their compliance requirements for privacy, security, etc. And then we can move on from there. There will always be a chance that you'll come to us with a plugin and we might say, this actually is not going to, we're not going to be able to approve this request just because it, we run these risks or it's not in compliance with, you know, XYZ policy. So that's always possible. It's come up maybe one or two times, but more often than not, we're able to find a plugin that can get the job done that a user would like to use. On the other hand of that, I mentioned that sometimes plugins can become deprecated, and what that means is the vendor has decided that a plugin is no longer suitable for their network. They don't just delete it altogether. What deprecation does is they will no longer be pushing any updates to it. The version that's currently on the platform is the last version they're going to allow. So if you happen to have that plugin currently active, you'll see a little tag at the top of your dashboard admin that will say the name of the plugin has been deprecated. Please deactivate it. And I think a little bit additional information as far as any security risks and things along those lines. It won't just be taken off of your website. It will remain on your website. It will remain functional. It will not get any additional updates. And if you ever deactivate it, you can't get it back. It's gone. So that's what it means when a plugin becomes deprecated. Again, we don't really get a notification when that kind of thing happens. There is a change log that our vendor manages that has that information. Unfortunately, we don't get push notifications for it. So we try and keep on top of it. Sometimes things do fall through the crack. When plugins are deprecated, we do not turn them off because we don't want to negatively impact anybody's website. It's at your discretion whether or not you want to turn off a deprecated plugin. But just be aware, again, if you turn off a deprecated plugin, it's gone. You can't get it back again. When that does happen, and we are aware of it, we do try to make sure that we find a suitable alternative. They're pretty good about making sure that if one plugin goes away, there's something else available that will fill that gap of functionality space. So it's not like they'll take something away and you just don't have a functionality option anymore for a given thing. They always try and make sure that they give and they take away. And we also try and keep up with that as well when we become aware of those things, that if, you know, they take away the event plugin that we used to use, that we turn on a new one that you can use instead. So let's go ahead and turn on a couple of plugins, and we'll talk about what happens when you do that. So I'm going to turn on the Calendar Plus plugin. I'm going to turn on the Accessibility plugin. I'm going to turn on Divi Builder, Formidable Forms, and the edit workflow. Did I turn that one on? The web screen in the way. Let's move it over here. Okay, so we're still on the all screen, but if I now click over to active, you can see these are now listed over here. It's listing that I've got 5 active plugins. If I go to inactive, I can see there are 17 inactive plugins, and I can see specifically what those are. Oh, you know what? I'm going to turn on Fixity images as well. So again, it's pretty helpful to get a quick snapshot of what's available and what's actually turned on versus what is not turned on. The other thing to take note of on these pages is that for almost all of the plugins, a few of them don't have it, you will see this link that says documentation. I always recommend clicking on this link. What it will do is it will take you to the vendor's help guide specifically on the page for that given plugin. So you get a rundown of what the plugin is supposed to do and how you're actually supposed to use it, any limitations, things along those lines, and even some troubleshooting help as well. So I definitely recommend that once you, if you're considering turning on a plugin, click on that documentation link. If you have turned on a plugin, turn on that documentation link, because this is where you will get the information that you need about, okay, now how do I actually use this plugin? So once you're in your WordPress site and you're kind of clicking around and trying to create your content, if you come up against a roadblock, you can always go to the EduBlog page for that plugin to get more information. And you can see they're really good about having screenshots and everything. So it's an incredibly helpful resource. If you don't get to it from the plugin admin, and every page in the back end of your site, down at the very bottom, there will always be this little tag that says hosted by Campus Press, which is our vendor. And then for training and support, visit the EduBlog's user guide. And I'm going to bump that up because I have the feeling it's pretty small for you guys. So right down here, hosted by Campus Press. Again, that's our vendor. And then for training and support, visit the EduBlog's user guide. And this, again, is where you can get into the specific step-by-step instructions with screenshots for really everything across the site. But again, just talking about plugins today, you can click over there into the plugins and tools, and then find the one that you need help with specifically. So to be perfectly honest, this is where I've learned almost everything I know about WordPress. All right, so now we've got some plugins turned on, and you may or may not have noticed a few things when I did that. For one, if you look on my dashboard menu now, it's actually longer than it was before. Some plugins, when you turn them on, they add additional menu links to the dashboard, and that will be like the only way that you will access some of their functions. So for instance, I turned on that Divi Builder plugin, and now there's a link down here in my dashboard menu. But this is not the only place I can access the functionality, but this is where I would go to do like site-wide configurations for that plugin if I would like to. So I could go to plugin options, and then I could go in here and make some site-wide configurations so that anybody else who's an editor on my site and using the Divi Builder plugin, they will be bound by whatever configuration rules that I put in here. Same thing for Edit Flow. I turned on the Edit Flow plugin, and you can see there are now some there's a link over here in my dashboard navigation. I can go in here. I can do some configurations on how I specifically want it to work for me. So pointing this out, not just to show you this is where you might want to look for these things, but also, again, to illustrate that you turn on these plugins, but then there's often a next configuration step that you need to do and that you are responsible for doing as the site owners. So you'll want to think about, how do I need this plugin to work for me, not just for when I'm going in to make my content edits, but for if I assign somebody else in my office to go in and make content edits, what is it that I want them to get out of their experience managing on the back end of the site, and what information do I want my site to actually provide to me as well as the manager of the site once they've made those edits. And then again, here's another one for the Formidable Forms plugin. So I think you get it. There will be links. There will often be links in your dashboard that either allow you to make global site-wide configurations or to actually create content itself. So the Formidable Forms one, this is where you actually would create the forms that the plugin allows you to create. The other thing that will change is under this appearance section, and I should have showed you guys this before I turned on the plugins, but if you go to widgets, and if you'll remember from when we first started, widgets are what show up in this particular theme in the sidebar. Theme by theme, where your widgets show up will be different, but there will always be a space for your widgets, whether it be in a sidebar, in a horizontal area, in a footer area. There will always be a space for your widgets. And these widgets create space for some of this additional functionality. So the out-of-the-box ones, because again, this is WordPress and it's blogs, it usually has to do with search or categorized links to blog post information. So post by date, recent post, post by category. You can have the comments, if there are recent comments on posts, that kind of thing. Those are the out-of-the-box things that will show up in your widget area. Once you've turned on plugins, you will also have additional access to widgets that are specifically tied to those plugins. So for instance, we turned on the Calendar Plus plugin, and now I can see there are a couple of widget options here: Calendar Plus Calendar, Calendar Plus Search, Calendar Plus This Weekend Events. These are all widgets that are specifically available to me now because I turned on that Calendar Plus plugin. And so I can put those things into my sidebar or footer or whatever, wherever those designated widget areas are. And it's a pretty easy to use interface. It's just drag and drop. So if I wanted to, I don't have any forms, but let's stick with the calendar. If I wanted to put a calendar in my sidebar, all I have to do is from this side of the list, which is my available widgets, which I just collapsed out. The available widgets, you just grab it and you drag it where you want it to be, and that's how you can add something to a widget space. You can see right here, events have not been set, so links in the calendar will not work until I actually create some events, which we will do in just a moment. We'll create one. But I can just say there will be a title bar. If you do not put something in this title bar, there's usually a default one, so it's very likely just going to be upcoming events in this case, but there's usually a default title that is associated with whatever widget you're going to put in there. So I'm just going to put upcoming events just so I know what it is. The other thing that it wants me to do is to actually designate a page on my site to be my events page. So that's what it's actually saying here, is to go to the Calendar Plus admin in the back end of the site and designate what that landing page is going to be for my event. So I will do that now. We'll add a new page and I'll just say event. If you're at all taken aback by the view that you're seeing right now for the backend admin, we previously hosted a training on what's called the Gutenberg editor in WordPress. And this is the new editor that became available with the latest version of WordPress. And this is kind of what it looks like. Because I have Divi Builder turned on, I also get this gigantic sort of nag call to action link in the middle. Asking, do I want to use Divi Builder or do I want to use the built-in WordPress editor? I'm just going to click the one that says use the default editor. But all I'm going to do right now is just put a page title here. And I'm not going to get into much to how the Gutenberg editor works. As I mentioned previously, we hosted a standalone training for that a month or so back. I will share that with everybody as a part of the follow-up resources so that you can watch that video when you have time and decide if you want to keep using the classic editor or move over to the new Gutenberg block editor. So I have now created a page just for viewing events on. There's not going to be anything on it because, again, all I did was give the page a title. But now what I can do is go back into my dashboard and go to the events menu in my dashboard. I'm going to go to settings. I believe this is where I need to go. Yes. So there are some default things here that you can select. I'm going to skip right down to where it says events page. This is where it wants me to designate what page is going to host my events. And then there's some additional settings that we can change. I'm going to go ahead and select United States here at least, but everything else I'm going to leave as is. I'm going to say save changes. And so now if we visit my site, I think I have it over here. I'm going to refresh the page, and I'm going to go to events. So no events found because I still haven't created an event. All I've done at this point is designated this as my landing page for events as I create them. So now if I want to actually create events, again, back in the dashboard while I'm still in the events section, I can click on add a new event. And this is where I would actually create the event page. So I'll just say event title. Let's get some lorem ipsum, dummy text for the page, what real text would look like. So what is lorem ipsum? Add, not head text. Here we go, paragraph text. Okay, so there's my text. Then we're going down here, event details. Is this a one-time regular event, recurring, multi-day? We're just going to do a one-time regular event. Let's put a date in here. We will say September 3rd. And we will put a start time and an end time. And I think what I need to do on this one, let's go ahead and say publish. Okay, so now I can view my event page. This is what the standalone event page looks like out of the box. This is basically what you're going to get. We don't really have any styles, any custom styles on it. The way that we've sort of customized the theme, we haven't customized every single widget just because there, again, were so many. It would have just taken forever. You guys never would have seen these plugins in the light of day. And again, we don't have any way to know which plugins one site's decided to use versus another. There are customization options every site owner can do in their site, and so any customizations that we do to the plugins could become a moot point at that point. So the plugins are available out of the box. The way they look is the way they were built. So again, this is what the page is going to look like for the actual event page. If I now go to my event landing page and refresh this, this is what it looks like on the event landing page for the feed view of it. So that's just a quick demo for you for how to use that Calendar Plus plugin, just because events is one of those things a lot of site owners say they would like to manage within their site. You're going to want to use that Calendar Plus plugin to do that. We do have a number of people ask, can we turn on plugins for Google Calendar? We do not currently support the one that's available in the back end of the platform, just because it requires an API key that we can't provide to you guys. So for that reason, unfortunately, we couldn't turn that plugin on. So the Calendar Plus plugin, however, does meet the basic requirement for being able to create event pages and have a feed. There are other views than the one that you're seeing right here. Again, this is just out of the box what you can expect to see, but you can play around with the configurations to get it to look the way you would like to. If you are very entrenched in using a Google Calendar already, like you guys have been using it for years and you want to get it on your site, you always have the ability to use the embed option that Google Calendar provides. Just be aware that that's sort of a two-step process. You have to grab the embed code from your Google Calendar account and then paste that embed code into your WordPress website, but you're never going to be managing the events from your WordPress site. They will always be managed from your Google Calendar account, and they will just basically get mirrored on your WordPress website. So that is something to keep in mind when it comes to event calendar management. The next thing I want to show you guys for the plugins, and I'll go back into my dashboard over here. I don't need that. Is the Fixity plugin that I turned on there towards the end. So I'm going to go ahead and start to add a new page here, and we're just going to add an image to it. Now, the reason why I turn on that plugin, we always recommend that every site owner turn on this plugin. And the reason why is because it can be really difficult to make sure that you have high quality, high resolution images for your site. You might not have the time or the bandwidth to work with our photography team and marketing and creative services to get photos. Maybe you just need something kind of generic. What we don't want you to do is go over to Google, type in a search term, and then take an image from a Google image search. That opens you up to potentially infringing on someone's copyright, like using an image that they have not given permission for anyone to use. So we don't want you guys putting yourselves in that position. We don't want you putting the university in that position. We want to make sure that whatever images you're using, they are open source, free to use images. And that is what the Fixity plugin will allow you to do. So I'm just going to call this my Fixity page. And again, I'm going to say use the default editor just to get that to go away. And we are going to start typing. I think I still have the same text on my clipboard. So yeah, we're going to do that. So now I've got some text on my page. And I'm going to add an image. Again, this is the new Gutenberg block editor that's available as the latest version of WordPress. I'm going to move this image one up to the top just to make it a little bit easier to see. And what Fixity allows you to do, as I mentioned earlier, is to find open source, free to use, high quality and professional photos to put onto your website. So I'm still getting used to this interface. I think I go to Media Library. Nope, not Media Library. Okay, we're going to do not it. Sorry guys, I'm getting used to the block editor myself, and if I still am struggling with it after this, I will go to the classic editor. Gallery. I did turn it on, didn't I? Yes, I did. Okay, good. Okay. We want to add an image, so let's see. Let's try this again. Gosh, why can't I find it? Really sorry about this, guys. This is confusing. Oh, yep. Thank you very much. Just got a reminder from my wonderful, wonderful colleague Annette, who's on the chat. I'm looking in the wrong place, so I need to actually go to widgets. Or not. They made this so hard. I might have to, let's go to the classic editor. Okay. I'm going to add a classic editor in. And this classic editor has this wonderful add media button, which really just makes life a lot easier. Okay, so now that we've got our add image wizard up here in front of us, you can see that I've got a couple of options here running down the left sidebar for what source I want to use for adding the image, as well as how do I want the image to display. I'm going to go here to this last one, which is the Fixity images. And here you can see there's just a simple search box. You can put in a search term and make sure you spell your search term right. And it will give you just a bunch of results that match the search term that you put in. The more generic you are, the more results you're going to get. If you narrow it down, you'll get more specific results. I've used many of these puppies before because I love the puppies. Let's use this guy. So what happens if you select one of the images, it gets uploaded into your site for you. So you can reuse that image over and over again. This is a replacement for an old plugin that we used to have that did not actually upload the image to your site, but this one does. Once you've selected the image, you can see some of that sort of back-end metadata information about it. So the file name, type, the date that you selected it, so on and so forth, the dimensions. There will be a default title on it, which that title field is required. Sometimes there will be alternate text on the image as well. If there is not, you have to fill in this field. This is used for digital accessibility for anybody who can't see the image themselves for whatever reason. They might have a visual disability, they might be on low bandwidth, they might have a cognitive disability that makes it difficult for them as well, so they might prefer to use a screen reader. In those cases, for anybody using a screen reader, what you put into this alternative text field will be read aloud to them as opposed to them seeing the image. So you always want to be describing what's in the image itself. You don't want to just be renaming, putting in here whatever that file name is. That doesn't give them any context for what the actual visual is. You want to be describing what's in the image itself. So in this case, we have a puppy, stares out at you from a box. And that basically tells anybody who can't see this image what's actually in it. If somebody is on a low bandwidth network, maybe you're on the metro and you still got just the barest amount of signal so you can't load the image, that alternative text is going to display instead. So this is what that person would see as opposed to actually seeing the image in that case as well. So you always, always, always want to fill in your alternative text and describe what's going on in your visual. The rest of these fields, feel free to leave them as is or to leave them blank. This caption field gets used for accreditation back to the photographer, and it's, you know, it's good form to leave that there or to make sure that there's accreditation to the citation accreditation to that photographer in some way, because again, they are allowing site owners around the world to use their photos for free. The least you can do is put a credit back to the photographer. So I'm going to leave that caption as it is. And I'm really not going to mess with anything else here. If you want to play around with those, you can. Otherwise, don't worry about it. So I'm going to say save all changes. And ooh, there we go. This insert into post is what I'm looking for. I can't see it very well on my screen with it blown up. So now we can see on the page, I've got my very cute puppy picture. And now if I go and publish this page, I've got this high quality photo of this very adorable puppy. There is the citation back to the photographer. Again, you can customize this, but please, I think that it's just good form, again, to not delete it altogether. I left all of the default settings in on the image, so if I click on this now, it's going to actually open the image up in a big high-res version of it. That's a setting that you can change if you would like to, if you just want to only see the image in the smaller scale on the page. That's a setting that you can do when you're actually editing your page and selecting your images. So just be aware of that. The default is for it to link to a larger version of itself, but you can turn that off and have it so that the image just stays static on the page, not linked to anything. So that is the Fixity plugin. The last plugin that I really wanted to walk through with you all is the Formidable Forms plugin. We get asked a lot, can WordPress, can GW Blog support forms? Yes, it can. There's a plugin for that. The one that we have turned on is the Formidable Forms plugin, and I have not seen it not meet a user's needs yet. So just like I did with the other plugins, I'm going to go to my dashboard, and then I'm going to go over here where it says Forms. And so they kind of break it up into a couple of steps depending on what it is that you're trying to do. Let's see. I want to add a new form. Oh, here we go. This is a new link to add form. So if you've used this before and you're struggling like I just did for a second to find the add new form button, here it is. So once you click on that, it's going to ask you for a couple of things. Namely, do you want to start with a blank form, start with a template, which is a new option, or import a form from an XML file, which is also a new option. Or at least it wasn't readily apparent if these options were available before. So you can see they've made some changes to make these things more obvious to you. I usually start with a blank form, but feel free to start with a template if you would like to. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but I am going to start with a blank form. So let's see if I can get rid of that. So once you get in here, it can be a little bit confusing because you see this big interface where it's kind of like pointing out a bunch of different things, and you're like, how do I actually just get started? You literally just put in the title for whatever your form is going to be right up here. So I'm going to put my Formidable form. And then you can, I usually do create right away. They recommend that you start putting your fields in first, but I like to do create right away just because I have a habit to have multiple tabs open. And if I don't save right away, I run the risk of losing my work. So when you save your form, it will automatically take you to the settings page so you can start doing things like setting up your email notifications and whatnot. If you need to go back into adding form fields, you'll just click on this build link up here in the set of menu tabs. And then over here on the right, this is actually step 2. You can see all of the form field options that you have available. And again, they made a lot of things available, so I haven't seen a form yet that didn't really get, like a site owner yet who couldn't create the form that they needed to create. So this first tab is just the fields themselves. The second tab, you can actually start playing around with the layout of your forms if you want some form field options to sit side by side as opposed to in a single vertical row. And then there are also some default values. These won't become available until you've actually put fields into your form, but it makes it pretty useful so that you can have like a default value. Like if you have a name field, you can have it have, say, George Washington as like a default value, so that just to provide that little bit of context, extra context for your users on your form. So I'm going to drag it over a couple of form fields. The first one being text, and you can see it immediately puts that form field in there. The label will be the default for whatever form type you put in there, but you can just overwrite that to be what you want it to be. So I'm going to say first name. If I want this particular field to be required, you can just barely see there's a little gray asterisk right here. If I click on that, it becomes black. It gets filled in. That's how that field now becomes a required field. The text field that you see underneath it, this is a description field for you to provide for your end users. So you can say, please enter your first name. So basically to provide them some quick instructions, like help text, essentially. At the bottom, you will usually see this field settings collapsible dropdown. If you expand that, you can see what additional options that you have for that particular form field that you just put into your form. So it's going to offer you this ability to change the field type. It's not going to be exhaustive for everything that's over here, but it's a pretty healthy list. You can also say, again, if it's required or not. Unique means that no two people can put in the same value for this form. So if I only wanted to allow one person named Mary to fill in this form, I could click this button, and whoever got their submission in, whatever Mary got their submission in first, all other Marys are out of luck because I've said that that field has to be unique, and I'm not going to accept more than one Mary. That's not really something you want to do, obviously, for like a first name field, but think about maybe if you want to make sure somebody doesn't submit the form more than once, maybe you make the email address that they provide a unique field. I actually do that very often for our registration forms. We want to make sure only one person is registering for a seat for our sessions at a time. So I'll make the email field unique so that they can't register multiple times by accident and therefore take a seat from somebody else. So that's the use case that I'm most familiar with, but you all might have use cases within your office that would make it more applicable to you, for you to use. And then for specifically for if the field is required, the default is this asterisk to make it obvious that the field is required, but it does give you the ability to change that to some other type of character. I've never done this. I don't know what it's going to look like on the front end if you choose to change this, so your mileage there might vary if you choose to. I think the asterisk is pretty universal for people to recognize that this is a required field, so I don't really think it's worth messing with a proven formula. And then again, there are additional configuration options that you can do on your individual form fields, including conditional logic. So saying, I want this field to show, be shown, or be hidden based off of any combination of rules that you want to create here. I don't want any conditional rules here, so I'm going to click this minus, and that's going to go away. But be aware that you can put conditional rules on your form field. I'm going to close that field setting option. I'm going to put in another text field, and you can see as I hover it here, that line shows up to let me know where it's going to be. And I'm going to say this is my last name field. And again, I'm going to say that's required. If you wanted an email address, always make sure you're using the actual email field. It's going to validate proper email format at the very least for you. Let's see, the same thing for things like the website URL field. Like if you see these dedicated fields for like contact information, so to speak, it's always better to use those than to use the standalone text fields, because those text fields are free form. A person can put whatever they want in there. These dedicated form fields are going to have some level of validation in there for you to make sure that they're meeting the proper format, so that if you ask somebody for a website address, this field, for instance, might be looking for HTTPS or www, whatever the validation rule is for them. It's going to make sure that that form field is filled in appropriately for you, so that you know that you're getting legitimate information from your users. So I'm not going to put in every little thing that you can put here. I'll put a star rating because it's one that I saw the other day that I think is kind of fun. But otherwise, I'm just going to go ahead and say update my form, and that's all I've got so far. First name, last name, email, and a star rating. You can see I got a form was successfully updated message here. And then if you go over to your settings tab now, this is, again, where you can start creating the actions for what happens after somebody clicks the submit button. So this first one that says general, this is where you're going to determine what page loads, like what confirmation page will your end user see, either page or message will your end user see upon hitting submit. So the default behavior is that it just shows a message on the page itself. And if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, this is what that default message is. So if I were on the front end right now and I submitted the form, I would see the page reload, all of the form fields would still be there, but I would have this message that says your responses were successfully submitted, thank you. As the content owner and the site owner, I can change that now so that it could be a little more specific, a little more in context with whatever the user submitted. For instance, on our form for requesting access to our official GW blog templates, we put information in about how long it takes us to process those requests. So this is a great way to do that. If you don't just want that to be a short message, you also have the ability to say redirect it to a page. And you can put in what that page link is. That can be a link here on your website, which is what we recommend. If you would like to, for whatever reason, you can send them off-site, but we don't recommend that. It's pretty jarring for your users. And then obviously you can also say show page content as well. And from there you can actually dedicate a page on your site as well for that. I tend to just stick with the show message one. I'm not really going to get into these other options. You can play around with them at your leisure to see how they sort of meet your needs, or if they don't meet your needs, you can just leave them alone. And I'm going to go down to the form actions. So this is where you can set up your email notifications once a form has been submitted. And email notification is the default. You can see there are a couple of icons here. Really just these first two are available. So the first one is the default one where it will send out an email. The second option is to create a post. So this is something we've had some people say, can people submit posts on my site without having backend access? Yes, this plugin allows you to do that in theory. Again, this is not something I've ever tested, so I don't know what that's going to look like for you. You're going to want to test that pretty extensively before you give, just any random person the ability to submit information to your website that will then become a post on your website. Because once it's on your site, it represents you. You might have like a disclaimer on there at some level saying this was the views of somebody else, but you did basically give permission for users outside of your organization and essentially outside of your control to put information on your website. So be very careful if you choose to use this option. I'm not going to go through it for all of the reasons that I just told you, but I do want to make sure that you're aware that it is there as an option. Instead, I'm going to just open up this email notification option, and you can see here all of the default configurations that are in place. So Label is a back-end thing. You don't have to change it if you don't want to. I'm going to leave it as is. This to field, it's going to be who is it going to email. So because it says admin email, it's looking to email the site owner, like whoever is set as the administrator on this website. And what you're seeing right now, this open bracket admin underscore email, then close bracket, this is what's referred to as a form token. It allows every form field and as in addition, like a lot of the information in the backend of your WordPress site in general will get assigned a token, like a field token. And by putting those tokens into these fields, they can dynamically populate the information. So instead of putting a specific person's email here, if there's a token someplace, either based off of a user profile or a form field, it will dynamically put that information in when it sends out the email. So additional tokens that you see here is the site name, so that's what the from name would be, and then the admin email as the from email address. Now, one caveat with this, our vendor Campus Press, as a security measure, changed the way that the from email would come through, just because unfortunately it's very, very easy to spoof emails. And so what they had to do is set it up so that I would say, for instance, from whatever site name or other information that you put here, then it would put the token email, and then it'll say something like on behalf of, and then there's like an administrative email from Campus Press that you would see. So it's never just going to say from online strategy at GWU, for instance. It might say from online strategy at gwu.edu on behalf of, and then the Campus Press admin email. And again, that was done because they were unfortunately seeing a huge spike in spoofed email addresses that were causing issues. So as a security precaution, they removed the ability to completely mask what that from email address was going to be, so that your end users and they could be more confident in where those emails were coming from. If you would like to use tokens, you can see over here in this field section, those form fields that I created are now all available as tokens. So if I wanted any one of those to now become a token in my my configuration for the automatic email that will get generated, all I have to do is put my cursor into the field that I want it to be. So for instance, in this from section, instead of the site name and the email, I can say from first name. Work. Where's my cursor? I hope you guys see my cursor. There we go. From first name, and then from last name, you just have to click on it with your cursor active in the field, and it will put in those tokens for you. And now when this email goes out, whatever first name and last name information was entered into that field, that's what's going to show up in the from field. Now, again, with that caveat of the on behalf of Campus Press, whatever the case might be. But it will also have that dynamically generated information. And however many form fields you have, that's however many tokens you will have available. I didn't have a lot of fields on my form, so we don't see a whole lot here. This one, so there's the name information there, and then here's the email address. So I can include that as well. And now that's a dynamic piece of information that will get generated when that email goes out. So it's really, really robust and customizable as far as what you can do for those email notifications that go out. We always recommend having one go to the form creator / site owner. That may or may not be the same person. And we always recommend having one go out to whoever submitted the form as well, for them to get basically an email receipt confirmation that their form submission was in fact received. Down at the bottom, you can say when this will happen. So do you actually want this to be upon the creation of, it says create, and what they mean there is by when they click the submit button. It says create, as in they created a form submission. So that's the default trigger. There are some other options in there that I don't really think will apply to the vast majority of users, but if you would like to play with those, you can absolutely do that. But in general, the create option is all you need. And then just like with the form fields, there is some conditional logic in here that you can play around with. There's also some custom custom HTML you can play around with. You can see what all of that is here on the custom HTML tab if you would like. I am not going to adjust any of that, but if you feel comfortable working with HTML, feel free to make those changes there. If there were submissions to my form, I would see those listed here under the Entries tab. And then I've never used the Views one. I think this is like an analytics kind of thing, but again, I've never used it, so I'm not really sure. And then this last thing that you can see here is the option to switch your form. So to get to the settings for a different form, for instance, I could go to this other form that was created for content line strategy. And again, there's no submissions, but if I now wanted to make changes to this form, I could do that. So once you have your form created, the next thing you need to do is actually add it to a page. You create the form in one step, and then it just exists in the back end of your site. It doesn't actually show up anywhere on your site until you tell it where you want it to be. So I'm going to go to the contact page, and I'm going to add that contact online strategy form to this page. And I'm going to search for Formidable because I'm pretty sure I saw it before. There we go. So I'm going to say I want to add a Formidable form. And then you'll see this big box show up in the middle, and now you can actually select which form. So I've got two forms I can choose from. I'm going to choose this contact form, and then you can see that's what the options were on this particular form. If I wanted to change to a different form, I think you have to actually remove it. Yeah, so you'd have to remove the block and add the other form that you wanted instead. So right here, it's providing a quick hot link over to that Formidable Forms option because that was one of the last ones I chose. So I could click on that right now, select that other form that I just created instead, and I could remove this one if it's not what I wanted. So pretty easy to add a form once you've created it, but that is the second step that's required. Once you create the form, you have to take the next step where you actually add it to your page. So once you publish and click View, now you've got your form on the front end of your site with all of the fields that you created. So that's how that one works. I see we just have a few more minutes, and I think that I lost time when I couldn't find Fixity. I was hoping to have more Q&A time for you guys. So if you do have questions, feel free to put those into the chat. There's not that many of us on the WebEx today, so if you want to take yourself off of mute and just ask it directly over the line, that's fine as well. I just wanted to take one brief moment to acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is the Divi Builder plugin. It's one of our most popular plugins. I still think it has a lot of uses. It now has a lot of overlap with the new Gutenberg block editor. So, kind of feel free to figure out which one is going to work best for you. If you've never used Divi Builder, what it allows you to do is to create customized layouts on a per page basis and add a lot of those fun plugins and modules directly on the page. So having a page where, you might have a slideshow in between, sandwiched in between some text. That was somewhat not haphazard, but kind of clunky to do previously. There wasn't really a clean way to do it unless you kind of knew how to manipulate things with HTML and CSS. Divi Builder made it a lot easier for somebody without that kind of knowledge to just add it onto the page literally by just clicking some buttons. So if you choose to use Divi Builder over the block editor, which now incorporates a lot of that as a default functionality, like you saw me adding the different blocks onto the page and kind of, again, getting lost doing it because it's new for me, but it does have that same sort of functionality. There is some overlap there. So I won't say that one is better than the other. That's going to be a judgment call on your part as the site owner and the content manager. But just know that if you've never used Divi Builder before and you're kind of curious, like, how can I, in the middle of my page, add something dynamic that maybe animates or rotates or something like that, they tried to address that need with the Gutenberg block editor. If you don't want to use Gutenberg block editor, the Divi Builder plugin is still available and can also allow you to do those things. It's got a much different look in the new block editor. So if you've used it before, you might be a little bit taken aback by this new interface. All of the same functionality is there. It all just looks different. If you've never used it before, this will just be what it is to you. So you can say build from scratch, choose a pre-made layout, or clone an existing page. I'm going to say build from scratch, and it's going to give you the ability to now start creating your page layout directly on the front end view of the page. And you can see it tries to make it a little bit fun by having the admin for it follow you. I personally find that a little bit jarring, but you know, potato, potato, somebody else might like it. And all you would do at this point is start saying, okay, first I'm going to say how many rows do I want my content to be for this particular row. So I can say 3. And then I would say, what do I want in each row? So maybe I just want some basic text here in this first one. Maybe in the middle, I want to have, I'm going to accept the defaults here. Maybe in the middle, I want to have an image. And again, I'm going to accept the defaults. And then maybe here I want to do something more fun. And there are a lot of options for what fun could be. Pick and choose at your own discretion. Something to keep in mind is that it's going to use the default content area. So you can see this right sidebar is here. You can always hide that sidebar. So if I now go in here down at the bottom or up at the top and say to edit this page, oh yes, save. Definitely want to save the work that we just did. Pretty standard across all of the themes on a page is, oh, where's my page? Oh, I didn't name that page, did I? There's no title on my page, so we're going to call it Divi page. Over here in the right sidebar, you'll get some setting options for your page. And the default template is almost always what's going to be set, and that's the one that's going to have that sidebar in there. So you would just open up that template option and see if you have an option for a page with no sidebars. I'm pretty sure all of the themes that we offer have that ability to remove that sidebar, and that is how you do that. So now that I've done that, and I've published my updates to the page, I believe, but I'm going to do it again just in case. I should see now I've got a page title, and I've got no sidebars, and all of that content that I had in the Divi editor is now going all the way across the full width of the page. And then I could go back into the visual builder here to continue making edits. I could also make those edits on the back end, and it's going to be a lot like that Gutenberg block editor was, where you kind of add things in blocks. It might actually be taking me back to the front end of the page, which I was not expecting, but that's fine as well. So now I can continue adding things to the page if I would like to, but that's how Divi Builder works now in comparison to the Gutenberg block editor. So that is what I have for you guys today on the agenda. If you have any questions, again, feel free to put them into the chat. To take yourself off of mute, the floor is open. I'm not seeing anything yet. And that's fine if you don't have any questions. We went over a lot of information today. So in that case, then, I'm going to go ahead and let you all go. No need to drag this out. Thank you for joining. Again, I did record today's session, so I will make that recording available to you all and follow-up resources. I will also include links to the recent overviews we did of the new Gutenberg editor, as well as an end-to-end GW blogs overview that specifically uses the Gutenberg editor, so that you can kind of see all of those things in context as you have time to do so. And then some additional resources as far as accessibility for your websites and so on and so forth. So thank you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day and your weekend.